Millions of Aussies are right now struggling under the weight of record mortgage payments without knowing there is support available. And by law, their banks are obligated to help.
When it got really bad, we had about $100 left at the end of a pay to get groceries for a family of 6.
Life took a hard turn for Patrick Eldridge when he was diagnosed with a debilitating heart condition, leaving him unable to work for 3 months.
First thing to go was fuel for my car. I couldn't afford to drive. Next thing was, food, basics. So we couldn't buy treats for the kids, you could say. We couldn't buy them things anymore.
The manufacturing worker and Afghanistan war veteran left struggling to make ends meet and provide for his family.
We even floated the idea of selling my partner Maggie's wedding ring. You buy this wedding ring as to show for your love for your partner, and when it gets to that point when you're, having to sell something that effectively means the most to both of you, it's really difficult conversations that you actually need to have.
Patrick is one of 5.8 million, with a new survey revealing almost half of those with debt have struggled to make repayments over the last year.
We regularly see people who have fallen out of employment, have had an accident, family illness, a whole range of things that can happen to anyone.
But even though the struggle is very real, 3 in 10 say they wouldn't seek help from their bank or lender through a hardship assistance arrangement. Instead, 42% said they'd rather sell their belongings or assets, and 40% said they'd prefer to get a second job. ASIC today launching a campaign to remind people of their rights.
Any person who's struggling to afford a loan has the right under the national credit laws to apply for hardship assistance, and that can range from a reduction in payments, a hold-on payment, capitalising arrears at the end of a hardship arrangement. You just have to ask your lender for that support, and you are entitled to it.
Patrick says he's testament to the fact that reaching out for help can work.
I still can't believe it, where it's taken me. I've got breathing room to be able to look at my finances now. It's still pretty tight, but with the help that I received from the helpline has been astronomical.
Urging others to do the same.
Just pick up the phone. You'll just be amazed that when you think you feel like you're drowning, that you can actually take control back.
But what rights and options do consumers have to get themselves out of a debt disaster?
We are live from the lands of the Kulin Nation, and Joel Gibson is the author of Kill Bills, and he's here to tell us how to do just that. Joel, what obligations do banks have to customers who are struggling with their debt?
Well, banks are obliged to help you if you're in hardship, and not just banks for that matter. Energy companies, telcos, they all have hardship obligations where if you go to them and you say, I'm struggling to pay, then they can't just immediately send debt collectors after you or foreclose on your home. They have to go through a process where they try to work through that debt repayment with you and see if there's a short-term solution. So it's really important, if you are struggling to pay your debts, that you don't just stick your head in the sand and do the ostrich thing. Call for help. See if you can avail yourself of some of the options that they have, and you might just be able to get through what is a temporary crisis and come out the other side.
So this all sounds great, and it's all well and good for ASIC to come out and say, guys, know your rights. But we did a story, last week before, very recently, about how 1 in 3 people who seek this assistance end up dropping out because banks just make the process really hard. The documentation is just far too much for them to put together. I mean, is it really as simple as people just knowing their rights?
Well, I think that shows that that's not good enough, and banks need to do better. And partly what ASIC is trying to do at the moment is to put pressure and extra scrutiny on the banks to make sure they do better and that they have really, streamlined hardship processes in place. So they should be doing a better job than they have in the past. And I think it certainly pays to ask.
And banks are nice. So if you ask them, I'm sure it'll just be. Right. They're just lovely. They get a bad rap for all the evil stuff. They do. People are now even selling their assets and personal belongings to make ends meet instead of reaching out to help. So at what point do you think people have no choice but to sell?
Well, I think that's a good instinct. If there's only really 2 levers you can pull if you can't afford your debt repayments. You can earn more money somehow, or you can cut your costs. And so people are looking for whatever way they can to cut their costs. That might mean selling assets. It might mean selling things around the home, or cutting, back on private school fees or private health insurance or any of these other costs which are, flexible to some extent. But at the end of the day, the reality is some people are going to have to sell their homes. Some are already doing so. And 16% of people, for example, that are selling their properties at the moment, they bought that property in the last 3 years. That's a really strong sign that people are selling because they're just really, really battling with these mortgage repayments.
Joel, thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys.